Today we're going to be checking out BenQ's flagship home theater DLP laser projector, the W5800. Alright, so this is the menu for the BenQ W5800 DLP laser projector. Let's go through the options and see what kind of settings that we have. First section here is the picture settings. So right now under picture mode, we get a few different options. We get bright cinema, filmmaker mode, cinema, and then user. If we pick user, we can go in and change a few different options here. We've got user management. We can save settings and then rename them. We get some sliders here. We get your brightness, contrast, color, tint, sharpness, and then brilliant color slider. But to get the most accurate picture mode, I'm going to go ahead and put this on filmmaker mode. So let's go ahead. Go down to the advanced color settings, and then from here we get a few different options. We got 2.4, 2.5, 6, we get the BenQ, 1.8, 2.0, 2.1, and then back to 2.2. For color temperature tuning, if you have the appropriate gear, you can go ahead and calibrate this using your calibration gear. And full disclaimer, I am not a professional calibrator, so the settings that I will be using is going to be the filmmaker mode, since that is supposed to give you the best calibration settings out of the box, or so I'm told. But if you do have the appropriate gear, then you can use all of these advanced settings, such as the advanced color temperature tuning. And then under color management, you have some options here as well. Then under Cinemaster, we have the color enhancer. So if you can see here, we can turn this up, and then the saturation improves greatly, as well as your brightness. So that will be kind of a season to taste type of option, I feel. And then for flesh tone, we can see right now it's at 0, but if we go up, this is supposed to give you a little bit more vibrancy in the flesh tone area. Pixel enhancer, right now it's on 0, but if you really want to juice up and sharpen up the image, you can see that this will introduce a lot of ringing. So I prefer to keep that off. Motion enhancer 4K, so if you want to give the motion a bit of smoothness, you can do that there. Local contrast enhancer, and then global contrast enhancer. So for the local contrast enhancer, by turning this on, we get a few different options. This will essentially split up the image into 1,000 plus different zones, and then brighten or darken those specific zones depending on what you're seeing. And then for global contrast enhancer, this will enhance the contrast as an overall. So instead of the separate zones, this will enhance the contrast for the overall image. We'll take a look at those options later. Next section here is dynamic black. We've got off, which you will get a notice. It'll say, when set to custom mode, dynamic black cannot be turned on. Do you want to switch light source to normal mode? So let's go ahead and say yes. So right now we've got it on low and then on high. What this will do, it will adjust the light output of the projector depending on how bright or how dark a scene is. So if you're watching a darker scene, it'll dim down to enhance black levels, but if it's a bright scene, it'll brighten up to enhance your contrast and black levels as well. And then of course we'll come back and check that out again. Under light source mode, we've got normal, which will keep the projector at its brightest. We've got eco mode. As you can see, this will use less light output, but save more energy. And then we have the custom option. So let's go ahead and select yes. And then once you select custom, you can choose how bright you want the projector. So we've got up to from 50%. So we've got from 50% up to 100% laser output. But I am going to keep this on normal mode, which will max out the laser. Next option here is the noise reduction. Then the last option is reset current picture mode. And then one more option up here is going to be the fast mode. So if you want to use this for gaming, you can turn this on or off. Next section is display. For aspect ratio, we've got auto, 4:3, 16:9, 2:3:5:1, anamorphic if you want to use this with an anamorphic lens, the anamorphic 16:9, and then back to auto. For 3D sync out, this does support 3D sync, so if you have a sync adapter with compatible glasses, you can turn this on or off. Then for HDMI settings, we've got auto, limited, full, and then back to auto. Then we've got your HDMI ED/ID settings, HDMI device control, HDMI power on-off link, and then you can rename sources. Next section here, we've got audio output. You can choose between the optical, the ARC output, and then back to optical. Then for audio output format, we've got LPCM and raw output, then back to LPCM. Next section is the installation. Right now we've got a few different options. We've got front ceiling, rear, and then rear ceiling, and back to front. And for lens control, we've got the lens lock. You can turn this on or off. We've got focus and zoom settings here, which you can adjust using left or right to adjust focus, and then up and down to adjust zoom. And then we've got lens shift. So this does have a motorized lens shift. As you can see, you can change this automatically. And I tell you what, this is probably one of the best motors in a projector that I've used. I mean, it's very accurate, very fast too. Unlike some of the JVCs, which are a lot slower than what's on this BenQ. So you can really fine tune this to your screen. And then of course, you can go back and just lock that off if you don't want anybody to accidentally mess around with your settings. Then we've got your 2D keystone correction, which you can adjust keystoning here. So if you cannot get this squared up to your screen, you can digitally adjust the image. Obviously, if you're picking up this projector, you're probably already aware that you shouldn't use digital keystone correction, as you are effectively cutting off pixels to get this as square as possible. For best results, get this as squared to your screen as much as you can, and do not use 2D keystone correction. And for corner fit is the same thing. You can digitally alter the image to square it up with your screen. We got some masking options, and then we have the test pattern. So right now it's off. You can turn it on. And then for high altitude mode, we've got off. By turning it on, this will ramp up the fan. So if you are in a high altitude area, that might be useful to you to keep the projector cool. We've got baud rate and then network settings. Then we've got wired LAN, control 4 settings on off as well. And then for system, we've got some options here. We've got your language, background settings, menu settings, light source information, operation settings, firmware upgrade, which right now there is nothing available. And then under information, it'll tell you what's feeding into the projector, the source, your picture mode, light source, 3D format, and the firmware version, which I am on version 1.3 right now. And that is it for the settings. As for specs, this is using the 0.47 DLP chip to provide 4K resolution. So this is a pixel shifting DLP projector. It is laser, so it is rated at 20,000 hours on normal mode and 25,000 hours on eco mode, which should last you several years before the laser starts dimming. It is a somewhat big projector, measuring 20.7 inches wide by 5.7 inches in height by 15.4 inches deep, and it weighs 23 pounds. One thing that makes this a lot better than some other of their more affordable projectors is the 14-element all-glass lens. So this will give you a razor-sharp, super clean image. It's got a motorized lens, which will let you move the image vertically and horizontally, as well as a 1.6 time motorized zoom. Around back are two HDMI 2.0 inputs with support for eARC, two USB ins, an RS-232, LAN connection, optical out, and this also has a 3D sync input, which is compatible with 3D adapters and compatible glasses. However, you can use 3D DLP glasses without an adapter. Brightness is rated for 2600 lumens, it covers 100% DCI-P3 color space, and it comes calibrated from the factory with the calibration report included in the box. I will be projecting on a 150-inch Screen Innovations Maestro 2 acoustically transparent screen. It has a gain of 1.1, and this is in a light-controlled, dedicated home theater. The first thing we're going to take a look at is its tone mapping. Here is the horses from the Spears & Munsell disc. As we can see, the 600 nit demo looks the best. We can clearly see all of the details in the background. There's trees, there's mountains, and there's detail in the foreground as well. Things start getting clipped in the 1000 nit demo, but you can still make out somewhat what's happening. And with the 2000 and 4000 nit demos, pretty much everything except the horses are all but blown out. So this did have a hard time tone mapping anything above 1000 nits. Next is the dynamic black setting. This will adjust the light output according to how bright or how dark the content is on screen. So for bright scenes, it'll boost brightness, while darker scenes, it'll dim the laser down. For this demo, I wanted to see how dark the image would get on the fade outs. It didn't dim completely black, but in person, you can see the laser reacting very lightly when the image changes brightness. It's really subtle, so it's not something that technically you should be noticing. Let's go ahead and check out the local contrast enhancer. Right now you can see that I've got it on off, and the black levels do look kind of raised. So let's go ahead, put this on low. As you can see, there is a slight difference. You can see the wording on the gun comes out just a little bit more, so it's a little bit more easier to read. So move this up to middle, and you can see, you can start really seeing the text on the gun, and then also the ribbing on the back of the gun as well. You can see each individual little ridge. And then if we put it on high, this gives the image the most pop. Again, where it says Colt on the side of the gun, that's easier to see, and also all the definition on the back of the gun pops out even more. And also the skin tone has a bit more pop as well. And this is the local contrast enhancer, which is supposed to divide the screen up into 1,000 plus different zones. So it'll brighten up certain parts of the image and then darken certain parts of the image. So that's the local contrast enhancer. So let's go ahead and keep that on high, then we'll go over to the global contrast enhancer, which will enhance the overall picture. So right now it's on off, so let's go up, put this on low. You can see we get a bit more pop. However, you can see the ribbing on the back of the gun here in this section. It's starting to crush a lot of detail. And then as we go up to middle, again, the blacks are getting crushed. And then on high, the image does get brightened up, but still we get some of the detail in the black areas are a bit crushed. So I guess if you want the most image pop, yes, putting this on high and then the local contrast on high definitely gives you a nice bright image for sure. However, I feel like you are sacrificing a bit of detail in the black areas. And here's another scene that's pretty dark. This is from the movie Bright Burn. Right now we've got the global contrast enhancer turned off, but as we go, switch it over to low. This brings out some more shadow detail, adds a lot more contrast to the image. However, going over to middle, we can see how this really darkens the image for some reason. Totally crushes detail in those bushes on the left-hand side of the screen. Just really kind of just sucks out all of the black levels. And then we go over to high, and then we can see all that shadow detail coming back. So there's a pretty stark difference between high, middle, and then low. And then here we are back on off. Another setting that is available if you're watching HDR content is the HDR brightness slider. Right now by default it is on a 0, so we can go down to a -2, which will really enhance black levels. However, if you find the image is too deep or you want more punch, you can raise the HDR brightness level up, which obviously brightens the image. However, that does raise your black floor. So the blacks, clearly you can see how the letterbox bars are just gray. They're no longer black, but the center of the image is extremely bright and punchy. So if you want to compare that, this is all the way down to -2, and then we'll go all the way back up to +2. Now, if you are watching HDR10 Plus material, you can see that you cannot change any of the picture mode settings as it is grayed out. You also can't access the user management settings. A couple more settings that you can't change are the gamma selection, and if you go under Cinema Master, you can't change the local contrast or global contrast enhancer, as HDR10 Plus has all of that metadata embedded into the content, which will automatically handle all of this on its own. So those are the few things that you cannot change if you are watching HDR10 Plus material. Now, if you are a 3D fan, this does support 3D. There are a few different modes that are available. Right now I am playing a 3D Blu-ray. So right now I've got it set up on auto, so it'll support frame sequential, frame packing, top, bottom, side by side, or you can just turn it off completely. And then the other options that we have here are 3D Sync Invert, which you can disable or you can invert your eyes. So those are the options that you have for 3D playback. And I will say that for most of the time, the 3D did work really well. However, occasionally during fast motion scenes such as this one, I don't know if it's the glasses that I'm using or if it's the projector itself, but sometimes when things are moving really fast like this, I feel the projector is having a hard time differentiating between what's happening in the foreground and the background. So occasionally the background will seem to flip-flop with the foreground. So when everything's moving really fast, it almost kind of flip-flops back and forth. So again, I'm not sure if this is the projector's issues or my glasses issues. But then there are other times where I'm watching other movies where everything works perfect. So again, I'm not sure what the issue is, but 3D is sometimes hit and miss with this projector. Now, when it is working good, the image is really bright, it's got a very punchy image, it's razor sharp, and everything works almost flawlessly. It's just the issue with the background and the foreground flip-flopping back and forth is the biggest issue that I've noticed. Coming from a lot of the more affordable DLP projectors, I think what really makes a huge difference is the better quality lens on the 5800. It's got a lens that looks just as good as the Sony Projector 8 that I reviewed a couple of months back, and the sharpness uniformity was equal across my entire screen. Now, this is still a pixel shifting projector, so if you're sitting close to the screen, you can make out the individual pixels. So it isn't as crisp as the Sony or the JVCs that I've had in for review, which are also native 4K projectors. The black levels are also not as good as the Sony or JVC, but with the dynamic black setting and the local contrast enhancements, it is one of the better DLP projectors that I've had in. The only other DLP projectors I think would give the 5800 a run for the money would be either the Valerian or the Hisense Ultra Short Throw that I reviewed very recently. However, I think the 5800 has a cleaner, crisper, sharper image overall, which did remind me of the Sony and the JVC. The detail is fantastic on this projector, and on my screen on full brightness, the HDR and colors looked fantastic. The projector was also quieter than both the Sony Projector 8 and the JVC NZ700. The only major gripe I had was with the 3D performance. I'm not sure why the eyes would randomly invert during fast motion, and I don't think it was the glasses, since I've used these glasses with several other DLP projectors without problems. Now, this could just be an issue with my review sample, so if you do have a 5800, I'd be curious to know if you've experienced the same thing. So leave me a comment and let me know. Another thing worth mentioning is if you are sensitive to the rainbow effect, you will probably notice them with this projector. If you don't know what the rainbow effect is, I wouldn't go trying to find out what it is because you may not be able to unsee it. That being said, if 3D isn't a priority, I can definitely see the 5800 being a worthy contender for a higher-end dedicated home theater space. The blacks were better than most other single-chip DLP projectors that I've tried, and as mentioned before, the colors were great and it is a surprisingly quiet projector. Well, those are my thoughts on the BenQ W5800, which at the time of this video is selling for $5,000. If you want more information on this projector or if you want to grab one, I will leave some links for it down below in the video's description. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you again in the next video.